Welcome back to Carrion Creature Feature. Tonight's tale takes us to the fringes of society, where cold-blooded meets the cold-blooded in a fight for survival. Story by Shane Sellers and voice acting by Auravoice. I present Gator Punk. Viewer discretion is advised.
The night was thick, with the oppressive humidity of a Florida summer. The tribe, as we called ourselves, had gathered around a flickering campfire in the dense mangroves, huddled together for warmth and companionship. We were a motley crew of four: Marco, Mary, Jordy, and me, Disco. Homeless, broken, and discarded by society, we found solace in each other's company. Marco, the eldest among us, spoke in a heavy Jamaican accent, a constant reminder of his distant roots. His salt and pepper dreadlocks hung down to his shoulders, and his sun-weathered face bore the wrinkles of a lifetime of struggles. Marco was an alcoholic, but he had a heart as big as the ocean. He often regaled us with stories from his past, tales of a vibrant life now reduced to the dim glow of our campfire. Mary, a fragile soul, sat inspecting a crumpled pack of cigarettes. Her once vibrant red hair had faded to a dull copper. Her emerald green eyes had lost their sparkle. She wore a tattered gray hoodie, a protective layer against the harsh realities of life on the streets. Mary had a heart filled with remorse, haunted by the choices she had made and the scars that lined her arms. She had fled from an abusive pimp named Cadillac, who had used the shackles of fentanyl to enslave her. We had found her wasting away under an overpass and brought her into our fold. Jordy, tormented by his own mind, was a white man in his 20s with wild, unkempt hair that resembled a tangled bird's nest. His constant repetition of thoughts reflected the turmoil within his mind. "We need to find a safe place, he muttered, his eyes darting around in a perpetual state of alertness. Despite his mental struggles, Jordy had a gentle soul and a childlike innocence about him. He was always the first to offer a kind word or share whatever meager finds he had. And then there was me, Disco, a young woman in her 20s with a shock of neon pink hair that stood out like a beacon in the dimly lit camp. My life had been a whirlwind of hardship, bouncing from foster home to foster home, and I found salvation within the tribe. My determination to protect my newfound family had become my driving force, and my graffiti-covered leather jacket and combat boots were symbols of my resilience. We had been surviving day by day, scavenging and begging for scraps to make ends meet. But our sanctuary, a makeshift camp on the fringes of society, was threatened by the county's crackdown on homeless encampments. We were left with no choice but to relocate. As we pondered our options, Jordy's face lit up with a spark of recognition. "Heaven is a place full of clouds like cotton, fluffy cotton. Old man cotton, out in the mangroves on the beach, chillin'." "What the heck is he saying?" Mary said, throwing the empty pack of cigarettes to the ground. "He's talking about that recluse named Cotton who's been living out past the mangroves," I replied. "Yeah, man. I remember Cotton talking about that place," Marco said, his voice carrying a mix of excitement and trepidation. "It's a long trek, but maybe it'd be worth it." Mary, her eyes still haunted by the memories of her past, nodded in agreement. "Anywhere's better than here," she whispered, clutching the fraying edges of her hoodie. The plan was simple: pack our meager possessions, collect supplies from the corner gas station store, and fill our water jugs. As we made our way to the nature trail that Cotton used for his campsite, Mary stopped in her tracks. On a park bench sat Tina, a slender black woman wearing fishnet stockings and a black tube top. Tina's eyes instantly fixated on Mary as she sat up from the bench. "What's up, honey? You know Caddy Daddy been looking for you, sweet ass," Tina said, crossing her arms. Mary seemed to recoil from Tina's presence, but a flame of courage flickered in her weary eyes as she stepped up to Tina. "You tell Caddy I ain't his property anymore. If he comes looking for me, I'll shoot his dick off. Mary pulled a rusted .25 caliber pistol from her waistband. No problem, girl. You know I'm out here hustling and surviving just like you. I'll tell Caddy you mean business. We got no problem, girl. Tina quickly began walking away from our group, stopping only to look behind to ensure Mary was no longer a threat. Marco slowly put his hand on Mary's shoulder. Mary, you're traveling with family. No need for that. Geordie, sensing the unease of the situation, stepped up with a crooked cigarette and placed it in Mary's quivering lips, tears streaking down her face. Come on, let's get the fuck out of this place, I said, pointing towards the trail. The journey through the dark and twisted mangroves was arduous, with our makeshift belongings in tow. The mangroves looked like ancient sentinels, their tangled roots snaking through the water like skeletal fingers. The air was thick with the scent of brine and decay, and the oppressive humidity clung to us like a wet blanket. Eventually, we stumbled upon Cotton's old campsite, but Cotton himself was nowhere to be found. His tent stood as a lonely sentinel against the encroaching darkness, the flap flapping in the humid breeze. We set up camp in the eerie stillness of the night, trying to ignore the feeling that we were not alone. The croaking of bullfrogs and the distant drone of insects provided a disconcerting soundtrack. As we settled in, unease hung in the air like a shroud. Marco and Geordie built several fires to illuminate the campsite, while Mary and I sat down, opening cans of tuna and fruit cocktail for dinner. We were drenched in sweat from the long trek and decided to strip down to our shorts and t-shirts. Marco and Geordie returned and sat down, picking up the open cans of food. Geordie held the fruit cocktail up to the light of the fire and smiled. No onions. All safe. Mary lifted a questioning eye towards Geordie and shook her head. Of course there's no onions. It's fruit cocktail. I looked at Geordie's dumb, smiling face and laughed. Mary continued to shake her head and then began to join in with her own laughter. Marco sat, amused by the campfire shenanigans, and sipped a bottle of white liquor. This is family, man. The night continued, with our group nestled by the campfire. We shared Marco's bottle as he told stories of the island he had once lived on as a boy. The stars in the sky cast radiant reflections on the water around us. The moon was full, and the cool air created a dreamy sense of tranquility. Mary stood, breaking the calmness of the night. Gotta pee, guys. Be right back. She turned and disappeared into the darkness. Marco took another swig of his bottle before passing it to me. Suddenly, the night was filled with loud screams, and Mary came running back, pulling her pants up. Damn it! I just saw Cotton swimming in the dark, she said, catching her breath. What do you mean, swimming in the dark? I said, standing to my feet. The group lit torches and followed Mary to an area where the mangroves opened into a large channel of brackish water. We peered into the darkness, searching for any signs of movement, but everything remained still. Geordie stepped into the water, raising the torch high into the air. On the embankment, the flickering light glinted off the dead, open eyes of Cotton. His mouth was frozen in terror, his body missing from the neck down. Geordie jumped back from the sight as Mary let out a scream of terror. As I stood there on the edge of the moonlit mangrove, my heart raced with terror. The silver beams of the full moon pierced through the dense canopy of mangrove trees, casting an eerie, ethereal glow over the murky waters below. The air was thick with the humid scent of mud and decaying vegetation, and the night was filled with the symphony of chirping crickets and distant splashes. Before me, nestled among the gnarled roots and shadowy recesses of the mangrove, lay a dark group of alligators, their eyes glistening like malevolent stars in the darkness. Their powerful, prehistoric forms were partially submerged in the brackish water. their scaled backs rising and falling with each languid breath. The moonlight danced upon their rough, scaly hides, accentuating the rugged, primeval beauty of these ancient creatures. I watched in rapt fascination as they lay there, seemingly motionless, their powerful tails and formidable jaws at the ready. Their eyes, like cold orbs of obsidian, betrayed no emotion as they surveyed their watery domain. Every ripple in the water, every rustle of a leaf, seemed to draw their attention with an unnerving precision. Then, the nightmare began. A monstrous, prehistoric shadow emerged from the inky waters, its eyes reflecting the dim light of our torches. A colossal alligator, larger than any of us had ever seen, slid onto the sandbar with a guttural growl. Panic surged through our veins as we scrambled to our feet. "Run! Run!" I screamed, my voice breaking with fear. But the rising tide had cut us off from our escape route, and all around us, the swampy waters teemed with more alligators, drawn by the scent of our fear. In the chaos that ensued, Marco, with a desperate look in his eyes, broke away from our group and attempted to swim towards a nearby trail that led to safety. His strokes were feeble, and the water churned ominously around him. The massive alligator was faster, reaching him in a flash of movement. The attack was brutal and swift. Marco's anguished cries echoed through the night as the alligator clamped its jaws around his torso, dragging him below the surface with a powerful jerk. The water turned crimson in the moonlight. We could only watch in helpless horror as more alligators joined the frenzy. "Marco, no!" Mary screamed, her voice a wail of grief. Jordy yanked the .25 caliber pistol out of Mary's waistband and charged towards the shoreline. He aimed the small pistol and fired 2 shots at the thrashing waves. The report of the pistol echoed violently, causing my ears to ring. Jordy continued to press forward, his face contorted in determination as he fended off an approaching alligator with well-placed shots to his snout. He created a path to the trail leading to safety. With adrenaline pumping through his veins, he shouted at the alligators, "Come on, you motherfuckers!" We could hear the alligator's guttural growls and splashes behind us as we made our desperate run for the safety of the path. However, as we reached the trail, a muzzle flash erupted from the darkness. Jordy stumbled, a look of shock and pain on his face. He collapsed to the ground, his eyes losing their childlike innocence as he fell lifeless. Cadillac, Mary's abusive pimp, emerged from the shadows, a smoking pistol in his hand. He had followed us into the mangroves and had found us in our moment of vulnerability. With a sinister grin, he taunted Mary and me. "Seems like you 2 bitches done fucked up," he sneered, a sadistic gleam in his eyes as he walked into the moonlight with Tina in tow. Mary and I were frozen in terror, our escape route cut off by Cadillac, and the alligator still lurking beneath the water. "Tina, get that dead white boy's gun," Cadillac said, pointing his revolver at Jordy's lifeless body. Tina hesitated, her eyes darting between Cadillac and the dark waters. As she reached for the pistol, she was suddenly attacked by a large alligator. Its powerful jaws clamped down onto her right arm, knocking her off her feet as the alligator began to roll. Cadillac watched in horror as Tina's arm was torn free, and she was pulled into the dark depths by another alligator. Cadillac, in panic, attempted to climb into the dense mangroves for safety. He clawed at the tangled roots, but his efforts were futile. With a desperate cry, he lost his grip and fell into the water. The alligators, drawn by the commotion and scent of fresh blood, converged on him. We watched in morbid fascination and horror as the massive reptiles ripped into Cadillac's flesh, their jaws snapping shut around him, snapping bones. Mary and I were finally given a chance to escape. We swam through the murky waters, our bodies trembling with fear. "Disco, I I can't swim! Mary shouted as she struggled to stay afloat. I turned around only to see her dip below the surface. I swam to the spot where she was and frantically reached down into the dark depths, my hands finding nothing. Just then, I heard a giant splash as my attention focused on 3 black forms swimming quickly towards me. I abandoned my rescue attempt and swam for the trail. With trembling hands, I crawled up onto the trail, gasping for breath. I couldn't see Mary anywhere, and the weight of guilt and loss pressed heavily on my shoulders. I was alone, the last surviving member of the tribe. But I couldn't dwell on that now. I had to keep moving, keep running from the horrors of the night. I knew that the mangroves were no longer a sanctuary, that they held only death and despair. As I walked along the moonlit beach, my neon pink hair now darkened by the water, I felt a mixture of grief and determination. I had lost my family, my friends, but I couldn't let their sacrifices be in vain. I had to honor their memory by finding a way to survive and thrive in a world that had abandoned us. With each step, I moved farther away from the mangroves, leaving behind the horrors of that fateful night. The oppressive humidity of the Florida summer still hung in the air, but it felt different now, as if a weight had been lifted. I didn't know where my journey would take me, but I was determined to find a place where the sun shone a little brighter, where the world was a little kinder. The night had been a nightmare, but maybe, just maybe, there was a glimmer of hope on the horizon. As I walked into the distance, I whispered a promise to Marco, Mary, and Jordy. I would carry their memory with me, and I would keep moving forward, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. The night had been thick with despair, but the dawn was a new beginning, and I was ready to survive at any cost.
This has been a Carrion Creature Feature production. If you enjoyed our blood-soaked story, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for more terrifying tales. Until next time, be sure to swim in safer waters.